All right. Welcome to the next episode of the Man Down Project podcast. I am very excited to have Phil Cohen here today, and we're just literally meeting each other for the first time. And so I'm excited to get to know Phil. So, Phil, first of all, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I always appreciate someone who's willing to talk about the hard stuff. I know grief isn't the sexiest subject, but it's definitely my jam.
Yeah, for sure. So we've been following each other on TikTok for quite a while now, and for me, it's been awesome watching the growth of your channel. I think when I started following you, I don't remember, but I mean, I think you were like maybe like 1,500 or something like that. Subscribe, like pretty small, but what, you up to like 75,000 or something like now?
Yeah, I think in the 80s somewhere like that on
Cool,
TikTok.
man.
Yeah, got
That amazing.
Instagram and YouTube, the whole thing. But yeah, TikTok around 80 something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, hey, I talked to Lenny Hunt, or I didn't know you guys actually knew each other. So he mentioned that on the call. So it's like I'm good to talk to the grief cool kids today.
Yeah. Yeah. Lenny's great. I love Lenny.
Yeah, he's a good dude, man. Well, here, let me just read your background, and then I'd love to get into your amazing story, man. So Phil's a grief coach, speaker, and creator known as the Grief Guy. After losing his 14-year-old son, Perry, in a tragic accident at sea, Phil's dedicated his life to helping others navigate the unbearable pain of loss. His signature program, The Inner Garden, which will include links to obviously, blends science, metaphor, and story to help people heal with purpose and hope. Phil's message is raw, real, and deeply human. That grief isn't something to get over, it's something to grow through. So, man, I love that message. So maybe I'll just turn it over to you, Phil, and just maybe tell the backstory, man.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I'm Phil Cohen. Most people know me online as the Grief Guy. My backstory that led me down this path is in July of 2015, my 14-year-old son, Perry, and his close friend were last seen leaving the Jupiter Inlet, which is in Florida, on a 19-foot fishing boat. And there was a bad storm that came out of nowhere. And if you've ever lived in South Florida, you know what I mean. These storms that come out of nowhere and they'll whip around for a few minutes and they'll be gone. This one was a bad one, carrying 40-mile-an-hour winds and heavy rains. Coast Guard was notified, and the Coast Guard searched for 7 excruciating days. It's all over the national news. Turned out to be one of the, if not the largest search in the history of the Coast Guard. In the end, neither of the boy was ever found. And to this day, I'm still not 100% sure what happened. And that moment completely changed who I am and who I was. My world was completely turned upside down. I'd never lost anyone before. I mean, my grandparents, but, it was nothing like this. And I had no idea what to do with that kind of pain, and neither did anyone around me. It was a brutal introduction to grief and to our grief illiterate society because there's this culture of silence surrounding grief. Like if we don't talk about it, maybe it'll go away. And eventually, grief gave me two choices: either be consumed by it or become a student of it. Um, and I actually Googled how to grieve because I thought I was doing it wrong, and all I found was 5 stages and silence, and that's not how I experienced grief. Um, yeah, and I didn't want something to tell me how I was supposed to feel next. I wanted something that I could actually do to ease the pain of unimaginable loss. I wanted to be an active participant in my own grief journey instead of a helpless passenger along stages. I spent years searching. I did all the therapy, all the books. I joined group, yoga, plant medicine, anything. And that journey eventually took me to a TEDx stage in 2021, which changed open. It opened doors to conversations with grieving people all over the world. I ended up quitting my job, becoming a full-time grief coach. And after years of frustration, lack of resources for people experiencing grief, I started carving my own path, and it's one through a garden.
Amazing, man. Wow. So maybe before rewinding the clock here, and maybe diving into a little more of the experience, I'd love to know. I always like to ask people, like, when you think about Perry, what are a couple of things that you really love most about him?
Perry's natural state was one of just joy and laughter. You know, when you were around him, he made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He had this laugh that was extremely infectious and constantly did things to make me be proud to be his dad.
So, are you okay if we go back to sort of that horrific experience? Okay,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
figured it would be,
absolutely.
man. You know, because every, I mean, every parent has imagined both two things. I think imagined, finding out their kid has died, and then also thinking that it's never going to happen to them.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, what was the phone call you got? And I mean, what was the experience like? I can't even imagine what the experience was over those 7 days. So if you just walk
Yeah.
us through some of that, I'd appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, literally, Jason. I mean, I could tell you that it would take me, no exaggeration, 8 hours to explain all the people, places, things that happened, and to the point where even trying to explain it to authorities, because there was, it was not only the Coast Guard, but it was FWCC, which is the Florida Wildlife Commission. FBI was involved, Navy was involved. So it was a lot of authorities involved in this. And then trying to explain everything to and learning as I'm going, because I really didn't know exactly what happened. At one point, I actually had to build a website for myself, like so that I could explain it. Like when you clicked on somebody's name, it would be show you that person's picture, everything they said, and it's just trying to put all the pieces together. But so I was actually in San Diego at the time visiting my brother. I got a call from Perry's mom, who is my ex-wife. We had been divorced for over 10 years when this happened. The essence of the call was Perry is missing. The Coast Guard is looking for him. I just had to let you know. And I was on the next plane to Florida. And yeah, and during that flight, I got a text from my best friend to this day, which was like the very first news article that came out. And they didn't even know the boys' names. It said two Jupiter teens missing, and that just made everything feel so real. Um, Kind of just freaked me out because I just had no idea what was happening. And then started having meetings with the Coast Guard, and they're explaining that there was um, so many people, thousands of people were searching in boats and along the shorelines and airplanes, to the point where the Coast Guard actually asked us, "Can you please tell these people to stop?" Because our pilots can't keep an eye on the ocean because we're constantly looking out for other planes. So it was just the outpouring of help and support from the community and so many people was just amazing. So from there, it was just kind of a sit and wait kind of a thing. I often say, like, if they were lost in a field somewhere, at least I could drive to where they were and start, walking a grid pattern day and night until I found them. But this was the Atlantic Ocean. It was felt very hopeless. You know,
And I'm imagining you on that plane and just thinking about how all these people around you, man, just going about their lives and with no idea about the hell that you are experiencing as you're
yeah.
traveling across the country, man.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that's one of the things grief has taught me is that, you know, you never know. You never know what somebody's going through, whether it's someone in the supermarket or, the guy who works at Starbucks. So oftentimes people put on this mask because they have to, but there could be some really deep pain going on underneath.
What was I'm trying to think of the best way to ask this question. Describe your relationship with hope during that time. I mean, do you ha- do you give up hope? Like, what happens to you in a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I had hope, but when things like that happen, your brain's in scramble mode, right? Like I was totally freaking out. If it weren't for the friends and family around me grabbing me by my shoulders, pointing me in directions I needed to go in, I probably just would have dropped to the floor. But my whole focus during that week was keeping the Coast Guard looking. And if you've ever lived anywhere near the ocean, people go missing all the time. Paddle boarders or surfers or people just get lost. Maybe the Coast Guard may look for half a day, maybe a day, but a week is unheard of. So, yeah, during that week, I had calls with Navy SEALs to understand survival rates and things like that. Cause so they went missing on a Friday. They found the capsized boat on a Sunday, and Coast Guard's the frogman jumped out of a helicopter by the boat, searched under the boat, around the boat, thinking maybe they were with the boat. When they weren't with the boat, you knew, okay, well, now they're in the water. And there's only a certain amount of time a body can survive in the water, regardless of how long you look. It just becomes a matter of time at that point. It was probably around day 6 of the 7-day search where I realized that I was never going to see my son again. And that was when I lost hope.
You know, everybody's experience is so unique, and I think about some of the things like from with my daughter's death that were like I'm listening to your story now, and I'm thinking about things that in a way where that maybe I don't know if grateful is the right word, but maybe I'm glad if they had to happen. Maybe I'm glad they happened and folded this way in the sense that her death was instantaneous
Yeah.
and it was certain in a sense of like there was no doubt about it. And I'm trying to imagine, man, like two things, I guess. One is well, I think the main one is I'm thinking about how unbelievably torturous it must have been thinking about Perry's death and how scared they must have been and all of that, man. Like that just was not a thing for Chloe. She died instantly.
Yes. And I followed your story, and I'm so sorry for your loss of Chloe, and even, before that, your wife, right? If I understand correctly. Yes, yes, it was very difficult to think of, you know, that moment. The moment that haunted me the most, I think, in the beginning was the moment that they went into the water, and, like, how scared he must have been, and to have to think without knowing with 100% certainty what happened, right? You have to think, "Okay, well, what are the possibilities?" Right? Did he die instantly? Did he float until he couldn't anymore? Did he get eaten by a shark? Like, and these are, I mean, unimaginable situations to have to think about your child in. So yeah, it's been very difficult. And like I said, I still don't know exactly what happened. After reading all the reports, and then there were so many articles online, and I remember going through every one of them and then all the comments to try and understand and look for clues as to what happened, because so much of it just didn't make sense to me. And the crazy thing is like I almost feel not it's grateful is not the word, but the God gave me this situation that's so crazy that in the work that I do now, it's very difficult for someone to understand my story and be like, yeah, Phil has no idea what I'm going through. Yeah,
Hmm.
he has no, you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
it's so to have to gone through all of that in a way, I don't know. I don't know the right words to say, has opened up so many different opportunities, to help other people, which is indescribable to be able to take something so tragic. And then, my goal was to just try and figure out like and learn everything I could about grief. And in that learning process, I've learned that there's not a lot of resources out there for people, when they
Yeah.
go through something tragic and they try to find help. There's not a lot of good help out there and not a lot of good information. So a lot of people get stuck.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Because there wasn't, you said on day 6 you gave up hope, and I'm wondering, like, after the search is called off, do you go through these moments where you just, your brain comes up with a new idea? Oh, maybe he survived this way. Like, I mean, where there's just this constant like bubbling up of some kind of hope, and then it's crushed again.
Yes, yes, of course. I mean, there was definitely moments where I thought, maybe they made it to an island, or maybe somehow somebody picked them up and I would hear from him again in some way. Yeah, I thought that for quite some time. And in fact, one of the harder parts and one of the probably more disgusting parts about this whole thing is that there's a lot of bad people out there too, right? Like people came out of the woodwork, and you had people calling me saying, I know where your son is, but if you pay me, then I'll help you, kind of a thing, which I instantly knew that that wasn't right. But there's just There's a lot of evil out there in the world, but yes, to answer your question, yeah, it still continued for quite some time, but then the slow reality started to set in.
Yeah. Now, that at that time, what was your understanding of grief? Because the reason I ask is it took me 5 years after my wife died to even understand that I needed to grieve. So I'm curious about what your relationship or understanding with grief was at the time Perry died.
Yeah, I had no relationship with grief, none whatsoever. Like I said, my grandparents had passed away, but I wasn't very close with them, so it wasn't very painful. So losing, the most precious person in my life so suddenly and so tragically was a brutal introduction to grief, and I had no idea what you're supposed to do. And at first, I did nothing. I pushed it down, avoided it, just didn't want to face the truth of what happened, and just basically curled up in a ball in a dark room and just cried for a long time.
Did you go through a phase, any kind of, let's say, self-destructive coping like I certainly did?
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely turned to alcohol and drugs, to just anything to numb that pain, and a lot of avoidance, you know, trying to dive back into work or do something else to kind of take my brain off of it. And, in some ways that can be helpful, to have some sort of distractions. But the fact is, grief isn't going anywhere. It isn't, so until it's faced, it will stay with you. It will, at some point you have to choose, do I want to be the passenger or the driver in this thing? Because there really isn't avoiding it. You can for some time, but if you do for a long enough period of time, it will find its way out. And whether it's through your body, through sickness and pains or disease, or through emotional, like, you start screaming at people, barking at people, you get into arguments, you destroy relationships, or spiritually, where you just curse God and turn away from everything.
Yeah, man. It's always it'll always be waiting for you when you're done.
Yes, it does.
So how do you go from, I mean, I guess while you are in this phase of sort of self-destructive coping, how much self-awareness would you say you had about what you were doing, why you were doing it, and how harmful it was?
I knew that what I was doing wasn't the right thing to do when I was doing it, but I didn't know what to do. And I knew that the longer I knew I was avoiding it for sure. And in the back of my mind, it was like, you should do something. You're going to have to do something, but I didn't know what to do. And that's kind of where even in, my TEDx, like I mentioned earlier, I actually Googled how to grieve. And because I didn't know if I was doing it right. I didn't know what to do. And when I came across this, stages, I was like, I that's not the way I went through it at all. In fact, there were feelings of guilt and revenge, and those which aren't even mentioned in the 5 stages. So I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And sometimes I'd feel all of them all in one day. It wasn't like a linear process, like this is not working. Eventually came to find out that the 5 stages was never intended for the bereaved. It was originally developed for terminally ill cancer patients to process their own grief, and but it was then somehow turned into this prescription, for grief. And yeah, so when I found that, which was one of the only models out there, with at least the best and most widely known model of the 5 stages, I was like, this is not working for me at all. There's got to be something else. That's when I started learning as much as I can.
And what kind of impact did this, like, what'd your life look like at this time other than that? Was it were you managing to function at a reasonable level? Was it falling apart? Like, how did that?
Yeah, no, everything fell apart.
Yeah.
Everything fell apart. Yeah. I mean, so instantly, I think why grief is so difficult for so many people is because it affects so much of your life instantly, right? Like, so there's, your mind, body, and spirit, right? Which are just all the, as like your brain gets and your body gets flooded with cortisol and all these hormones, and you don't realize what's happening to you. You just feel sad and you feel heavy. It affects immediately affected my identity. Perry was my only child, and like, I felt like does this mean I'm not a father anymore? It affected I didn't care about work prior to what I do now. I was a VP of sales for a technology company. I was doing very, very well. I didn't care about any of that stuff anymore. I used to care about, climbing the ladder, making money and success, and didn't care and still really don't care much about those things anymore. So it changed my values. Lost a lot of friends and some family members along the way because most people have no idea how to sit with you in this type of grief, and they avoid you like the plague because they don't know how to handle your pain.
Yep.
So everything fell apart. And then when I went back to work, which was a couple of months later, because I had no choice at that point, the first day back in my office, and I'm grateful that I had a door an office with a door. I had to go to the bathroom. To get there, you got to go out of my office and then out of our whole office and down the hallway. And I remember I just sat there and I was like, screw it. I don't care. And I just literally just peed in my pants. Like that's how broken I was. Like I didn't care. I didn't want to move. And I just let it go. Um, and eventually got fired from that role because I just couldn't perform my job anymore. I had a sales team. I just couldn't focus. So literally everything fell apart.
Man, that's yeah, there's so much there. I get, when you talk about your family and because I think what you alluded to this a couple times, right? Is we don't know how to talk about grief, man. Like, and the grieving person, I think people, like, to your point, they don't know how to sit with someone's pain, and they also don't want to make somebody else's pain worse. And so it just ultimately never gets spoken about. And then the grieving person doesn't want to be like, oh, here's Phil. How long is it going to take him to talk about Perry again? Like, what a downer, so then you don't talk about it. And then all of a sudden, it's like your son never existed
Mm,
somehow with the people you care about most. So when you say that you lost friends, I mean, can you like, talk about that? Like, how did that
yeah.
play out?
Yeah, you're exactly right, and it's kinda crazy. I mean, it's like we're all going to die, right? It's gonna happen to every single one of us. Why is
Yeah, right.
everybody so afraid to talk about it? It's like it just doesn't make sense, and that's part of my mission is to normalize this, and so that people can talk about it or at least help even other people who love somebody who's grieving know how to be able to sit with them, not try and fix it, right? But just learn how to be able to do or say some of the right things as opposed to saying the wrong things or doing the wrong thing. Yeah. So, I had one friend, close friend, that literally said, Phil, it's just too sad for me to be around you. And I remember thinking, like, it's too sad for you. This is too sad for you to be
Yeah.
around me. Like, yeah. And, really, you realize that, that's on them, right? It's not on the griever. That's on them. There are people that just can't handle that kind of pain. They don't know what to do or what to say, and some people feel like, oh, if I hang out with you, you know, that makes me think about maybe this can happen to me or to my child, or it's almost you feel like, it's not contagious. This doesn't rub off, just because you hang out with me, it doesn't mean it's gonna happen to you or to your family. But some people kind of feel that way. And then there were people that said nothing. And, there are some really bad things to say, some really stupid things to say, which at this point I give everybody just so much grace because I realize that people just
Sure.
don't know. But I think saying nothing is the worst thing that somebody can do. I mean, not even like an I'm sorry or anything like that, just complete avoidance. And, for me, that was not acceptable. The fact that you can't even reach out, no text, no nothing, just see ya, you know, that was pretty painful. So, yeah, those people don't deserve a front seat in my life or a seat in my life at all. So I no longer talk to them.
Yeah, that's so common. You know, and I think what happens is, I mean, I'm curious about your experience, but what happens is when people let you down like that, or they don't show up for the most important thing that's ever happened to you, it can be very easy to become angry and resentful. But the problem is obviously that keeps you stuck, right?
Yeah.
Like ultimately moving forward is, it doesn't mean not having boundaries, or standards, but at the same time, like, just to your point, being more compassionate that people are doing the best they can, man. And if they could be doing better, they would. And I need to acknowledge that to move forward. So I'm curious, like, did you go, I'm assuming you probably did go through some kind of process of getting to some level of acceptance?
Yeah, I mean, the acceptance I think is an interesting word. I struggled with that for quite some time because I don't know, for me it just felt the word acceptance felt like, I don't know, a level or two above failure. It just felt so like acceptance, and there's so much more to that. Like there are actually positives to grief. Like there's strengths and things that I've come to learn that um and experiences that never would have happened if this didn't happen. And it's just taught me so much about life with the vast majority of people that that were friends and family, we still are. But just for me personally, one or two people that I expected to be there, and I understand that they weren't there, but to never say anything, I just kind of wrote those people off. So there
Yeah.
was no acceptance for me about that because you know, I realized I said a lot of stupid things, before losing Perry too, because I didn't know, like, what to say to somebody, so I'm sure I said a lot of the wrong things, although they're in a better place, they wouldn't want you to be sad, all those kinds of things that
Yeah. Yeah.
people say because I didn't know any better, but, like I said, now I give everybody so much grace, when it comes to that because I realize that people just don't know.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, there's something I want to ask you, and I lost my train of thought there. So how do you go from, oh, I know what I was going to say, like my brother, man. Like I'm not close with my brother, but he has not, like, and I mean, like, literally not said a word to me. He brought pizzas, like some homemade pizzas over like 2 days, and then not a word in 3 years. I'm like, and I've asked him about it. I'm
Yeah.
like I said, like, hey man, I'm not mad about it. I'm just like, what I would love to understand your thought process on how you decide whether or not to say anything about Chloe. Like, and he goes, well, I just figured if you needed something, you'd reach out to me. I'm like, not even a, hey, how's it going? Like,
Yeah,
I'm your brother, man.
I
What the
know.
hell?
Yeah. It's so
It's what?
crazy. It really
Yeah.
is so crazy, but, I've come to realize that people that they don't know, they don't have the right words, and there aren't a lot of right words, right? Like all you can really do, even if I meet somebody, who's lost a child, I would never even say I know how you feel because you don't.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I remember making that mistake early on. I remember, going up to a gentleman and, who had lost his son in the ocean not in a similar way, but it was both the ocean. And I was like, I know how you feel. And he was like, no, you don't. No, you don't. He's like, I don't know what your relationship was like with your son. I don't know, the dynamics of everything. It's like, and he was right. He was right. And I will never say, I know how you feel again. So when it comes to those things, I realize that people, they do, if they've showed up, great. They were there for you in the way that they knew how. Asking somebody, I've posted a couple times about don't say like, hey, let me know if you need anything because they won't. They won't let you know. And you're putting the onus on somebody who's likely feels like they're drowning to have to then reach out to you and tell you how to be able to help them.
It's like you've just given me a task that I
Exactly.
literally cannot handle.
Yeah. 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 But, again, it just comes back to, the society that we live in because no one ever taught us how to be able to deal with these things or how to be able to help somebody or what to do or what to say, right? So when these tragic things occur, we don't know how to help anybody and then we don't know how to help ourselves either because, no one ever sat me down and said, hey Phil, at one point life is going to completely pull the rug out from underneath you. And when that happens, you should think about this, and this, right? Like just there's no class in school. No one ever teaches you. There's no survival book on these things. You just kind of figure it out on your own.
Yeah. Do you think your ideas of masculinity or what it means to be a man at that time, uh, how did that influence the grieving experience and maybe make it harder?
That's such a great question. Yeah, that is such a great question. I think, having been to more funerals for children than I'd ever want to go to, you notice the same thing play out at each one of them. And what that is as a society, when a child dies, we tend to gather around mom. And I don't think that we should stop doing that, right? I think that that's keep doing that, but oftentimes you see dad, kind of standing off to the side a little bit and having spoken with a lot of men now, you realize, their mindset is I got to be strong for my family. I got to hold my wife up. I got to be strong for my kids. And, I'm 54. So I was basically brainwashed growing up believing, real men don't cry. We don't talk about our emotions. We don't go to therapy. You just suck it up. You learn to suck it up and you just do the best you can. And, that strategy, that strategy won't work with grief. You can't just suck it up and just tough it out. So yeah. And even the whole crying thing, like that is such BS, that real men don't cry. That is such BS. I think it takes more of a man to be able to show those emotions and be open with people because you go through something tragic, you're going to cry, right? You're going to cry. I mean, and to feel like you can't do that in front of somebody else and that will make you feel less like a man. I think that is, yeah, that is a very harmful stigma that is just not true.
How do you think it contributed? Like one of the things you mentioned that you felt guilty, right? And obviously, any parent that loses a child, I mean, they're going to feel guilty whether it makes any actual sense or not. And you know, for a man, part of our job is to protect our family. And
Absolutely.
I think when we can't save our kids, or whatever, even if we had no earthly way to do that, it is like a knife through the heart of our masculine identity somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like you just said, like it's our innate instinct as a parent to protect your child, right? And maybe just as much or maybe more so for a man because like, yeah, we protect, provide those types of things, right? And when you're not able to do that, I know I can tell you 100% of the people that I work with feel guilt. And even when you talk to them, you realize there's nothing that you could have done, right? There is no way that you caused this. There's no way that, you could have saved them. In 99% of the situations, there was nothing that they can do, but yet, of course, we still feel guilty. And my understanding of that, like that was, I've like, that made me just wonder and get curious, like, why does everybody feel such a huge level of guilt? And I think, people feel guilty for three reasons. One, it's either they actually did something that contributed to that person dying, which again, in most cases, it didn't. Or like most people, you just feel guilty. You don't know why, right? But you really feel guilty. And what I've come to learn is like that this thing is not there to make you happy. It's there to protect you and to make you survive. And it's easier for people to believe. It's easier for us to believe that there's something that we could have done. Like, if I only would have done this, or if I didn't make that decision, like, then they might still be alive. Like, to think that you actually had some control over the situation. It's easier to believe that than to believe that we just live in a random, messed up world that you actually have zero control over pretty much anything. The only control we really have is how we respond to it, but it oftentimes people will take information that they have now or that they've learned afterwards and then apply that to what happened. And that is just so unfair to do to yourself. There's in almost every case, there's you didn't know, there's no way you could have known. And, if you did know, you would have changed that situation. You would have done anything you could, but you didn't. And, you know, to hold that, to hold yourself accountable for that, it's really just not fair. But people still do.
Yeah, and I think you hit on exactly why it is. It is way more unsettling to actually acknowledge how little control we have over anything.
Yeah,
So we create this illusion. And plus, if you say to yourself, if I only went back and did X, you don't know that Y would have happened. You
that's
don't know
right.
what would have happened,
That's
you
right.
know? So
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the freedom from, and I don't know what it's like for you. For me, what I did was I logicked myself into that fact that I don't feel guilty, right? Like, because my thought process was like, you know, I run like a coaching program for dads. I mean, I've been doing that forever. Like being a good dad is like a bit like it's a big part of my life and also my professional life. And so I'm like, on one hand, I told myself I did the best damn job I could, man. It was like so important to me. I made a living at it. But I realized it was literally 2 years later, earlier this year, actually. And I was talking to a therapist, and I just realized I still feel guilty. I actually do feel guilty. And I remember when I realized that, dude, I just was walking with my wife, and we were walking the dog at night, and I just started to cry, man. And I'm like, I don't want to have to face this anymore.
Yeah.
Realizing I felt guilty, and now there's like this another layer of the onion I've got to like fucking get through here. And I'm like, it's like getting to the top of a mountain and being exhausted, and all you see is more mountain peaks. So, it's like, oh my God. And the only way you have to go is forward,
Yeah.
like, so
Totally.
yeah, yeah, it's,
Totally.
yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, for me, the level of guilt was tremendous. And, the moment that it changed for me was I was literally curled up in a ball in a dark room. And, I say Perry came to me, and sometimes I second guess myself on that, but I feel like I saw him, but I definitely heard him. And, he said, "Get up, dad. Like, enough. Like, enough. Like, you've been curled up in this ball for too long, and, you know, live your life like we always talked about." And there's a story behind that, but it was like, live with passion, and I'll see you when you get here. And, I realized in that moment that I needed to give myself permission, to heal and to move through this and to not continually hold myself accountable. And, you know, all those feelings that are inside of us that, the good and positive feelings, like they're already inside of us. It's just giving ourselves permission to be able to feel them, right? Because oftentimes, I remember a couple of years after losing Perry, I was on a trip, and, I took a photo of myself, and I was afraid to post it. I was afraid to post it on social media with a smile on my face, thinking like, people are going to think what, he's traveling and he's smiling, and it made me think like, is there a certain amount of time that should pass before people, society would find it acceptable to actually be smiling again? And I think a lot of people live with that. Like I remember because the story was so public that I was walking around where I would live, and people were looking at me, and I could tell like that they were talking about me, right? Like somebody would like kind of like
You must have,
you could tell when somebody's,
you must
and
have felt like a leper, man.
yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, well, like how's a man who lost his son at sea supposed to look? Like, should I constantly walk around looking depressed and sad and, that because that's the way I'm supposed to look? Like, God forbid if I have joy in my life, that means that I didn't love him, which is, a pain that a lot of people carry. A lot of people, as I'm sure you know, right? Like the pain is the only thing that they have left. So they feel like if they let that pain go, then they're letting them go and letting their love go. And all of that is such bullshit. None of that is true, but people hold on to that pain. But there is a point, like you had mentioned, facing it, right? Like we do have to eventually turn and face the pain and the grief. Like I'm sure, have you ever heard, the metaphor of the buffalo and the cow?
I don't know. I'd love to though.
Okay. So in Colorado, near the Rocky Mountains, is one of the only places where both buffalo and cow coexist.
Okay.
And how these two animals react to a storm can really, I think, teach us something about grief, right? So when storms come over the Rocky Mountains, they generally head from the west to the east, and both the animals can sense a storm coming. And when a cow senses a storm coming, it immediately starts to run east to get away from the storm, right? So it starts running away from it. But if you know anything about cows, you know they're not very fast. So eventually the storm catches up to them, right? And the cows start to run with the storm, ultimately maximizing the amount of time, pain, and frustration that they spend in that storm, you know, as opposed to a buffalo, which is one of the only animals that does this in the animal kingdom. They actually wait for the storm to come over the crest of the mountaintop. And right when it does, they turn and run at the storm. They run directly through the storm, ultimately minimizing the amount of time, pain, and frustration that they spend in the storm. And I think as humans, when we face these tough things, we do the same thing. We have a tendency to run away from it and not face it, but that just delays the pain, delays it because it's coming with you, like we said earlier, right? It's coming with you no matter how hard or how fast you try to run. And I agree with this 100% with grief. The only thing is, I would say differently is that sometimes we do have to be the cow, right? Like it's okay to be the cow, it's okay to take time away. It's okay to run. You can't just be like, this thing happened. I'm going to charge right at it and rah, you know? But yeah, it wasn't until I started facing the reality of the situation that things started to soften, when I actually felt it and truly let myself grieve and feel the pain and go through all of it and even asking, okay, grief, what are you trying to show me today? And as opposed to just not running from it.
So you have this. It sounds like this Jurassic gear basically was a turning point for you. What do you do? So now you're basically as low as you've been, and you're probably in your entire life. I mean, what do you do at this point to start trying to move forward?
Yeah. I mean, at first, I went, like I said, I started going to therapy. I did talk therapy. I did EMDR therapy. I did a bunch of things, and those things were helpful. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do them. It just, nobody was teaching me what to do. What should I actually do? And there isn't, I wish, I'm sure like you, I wish there was like a formula, right? Okay. You've been through this thing, you do this, this, and this, and you're going to be good. Right. And it just doesn't work that way. But there are things that people can do to, let's say, speed up the process, and it's different for everybody. But I often use what I call like a triad, So if you are feeling just completely down for a long period of time, like you just can't shake this thing, or if you're stuck in it for a while, the first thing I do is look at my body, right? What is my body doing? Because if I were to say to you, Jason, there's a depressed person behind door number 3, would they, and I would say, I'll give you $100,000 if you can describe to me what they look like. Would their head be up, or would their head be down like this? It would be down, right? Would their shoulders be back, or would you be more like crunched up? You'd be more crunched up. Would your breathing be deep, or would it be shallow? It would be shallow, so like what you're doing with your body, and there are studies behind this, right? Like, I'm not just saying what I think to be true. Like, there are, like, fact check me on this. Like, so, there was a Harvard study done that even if someone were to stand in an expansive position, like let's say, like a Superman pose with your shoulders back and your hands on your hips and your feet spread wide, and you breathe deep for 2 minutes, that will actually decrease cortisol by a large percentage, and increases testosterone by a large percentage. And if you actually do the reverse, where you actually stay in this position and you stay, down with your head down and feeling like you're collapsed, increases cortisol and decreases testosterone. So the first thing I look at is like, what are you doing with your body? Because for me, movement started to break the cycle. Like, actually just getting outside for a minute, feeling the sun, feeling the wind in my hair, going for a walk, do it yoga, things like that. Getting my body moving was extremely helpful. So that's the first thing. And I think without doing that first thing with your body, it's harder to do the other thing. So first thing is do a body check, right? Like, what is my body doing? Maybe just start moving in some way, or do what I just said, that, Superman pose or Wonder Woman pose. I mean, try it for 2 minutes. You will definitely feel a difference. From there, it's like, okay, well, what am I focusing on? What am I thinking about? Because the fact is, like, what we focus on, we feel. So your emotions are coming from basically like what you're thinking about, right? So what am I constantly focusing on? If I'm constantly focusing on, poor me, I lost my son, my only child, and my life is over, I'm broken, you know, you're just going to bring more of that. And I'm not saying that you just need to push it away or deny yourself or just say, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, because your brain knows and it will be like, BS, you're not happy. So it's like, what are you focusing on? Where focus goes, energy flows. Right? I at this point right now, even years later, people ask me like, well, you know, how are you even surviving? Like, how are you even doing this right now? And so I know a couple right now who's basically spent all of their money trying to have a child. Like, they desperately want to know what it's like to be a parent, right? And you know, I was blessed enough to not only have a child, like, when you're in a delivery room, like, a baby's gonna come out, right? But when you see it happen, you're like, holy cow, it's like this insane, right? And that instant love that you feel, an instant connection that you feel. And I had, 14 and a half amazing years with Perry. I mean, where we've created memories that will always stick with me, right? And I choose to focus on the fact that I was blessed enough to even have a child and to be able to create all these memories with him, as opposed to thinking, you know, the other things like that he's gone. Like, so where our focus goes is a big part of this as well. And then what are you making it mean, and the words that you're using around it? Because the words, I don't know your religious belief, but I'm Christian, and, you look even biblically, God spoke the world into existence, right? God said, let there be light. God said these things. So any of those I am statements that you're saying, like, those have a lot more power than people believe. So if you say, I am broken, I am never going to be the same, you won't be. You won't be. Um,
Yeah, man.
the
I am
word,
I'm totally picking up what you're putting down there. Like I always think of it like, because you're right. You do these TikTok videos. We both do these TikTok videos. You get like freaking tens of thousands of comments on these things, and it's a really interesting insight into, I mean, just so many heartbreaking stories. But it's such an insight into how people process grief, and the amount of people who have said things like "I am permanently broken," and I'm
yeah,
like, man, the words we use, they don't describe our reality, they define it, man. And
absolutely.
you gotta be so intentional about the reality that you're boldly speaking into existence.
Yes. Yes. I love that. They don't describe it, they create it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely 100% true. That is a fact.
And so for anybody that's in, like, maybe in the pit, like where you are and you're curled up in a ball face, I'm curious, like, first is, how long did that last for you? Just so people have a sense of it. But if someone's like, when you were there, what was the first shift, as you started climbing your way out of it? Like, what was the first shift you noticed in your head or your heart where you were like, I'm moving forward here?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it was when Perry came to me, when he was like, and he said, he was like, "Just stop." Then literally I realized that, one, I know people say, "I wouldn't want you to be sad," right? I know where my son is, right? Like, I know and believe wholeheartedly that my son is in heaven. And the fact is, when I say, the sadness of thinking about I want him home, I miss him, which I do, right? And every one of us in our position, of anybody that's lost a child, everybody would instantly say, I'll trade places with you. Like, I will go through whatever hell you had to go through, and just so that you can live, right? And when I think about that, I think about where Perry is, and I bet he'd be like, "Nah, Dad, I'm good, man. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm good. Like, I don't want to go back there, right?" So, and the fact is, like, I know I'll see him when I get there. So, for me to think about, "Oh, yeah, I'm so depressed," and all of that, those types of things, and you're allowed to think those. It's saying a person's wrong for feeling that way, but all of those thoughts are, when you think about them, they're almost selfish, right? Because they're all about you. It's all you focused, right? And another big shift is when I realized, started doing things for other people. Like when I gave that TEDx, man, I'll tell you what, people reached out to me. At first, I was like, why? Like, why? And it was, I realized now it was just hope, right? I was giving people a sense of hope that I made it through this horrible situation. So if I could do it, that they can do it too. Right. So, and then serve something bigger than yourself. If you're in a place where you're really deep, dark place, get out of, because you can't think your way out of this. You can't. If you're in your head, you are dead. Right. So, it's go serve somebody, go help somebody else. And through that was like, started to give me a lot of hope when I started talking to people and people being like, thank you so much. Like, I really needed to hear that today. And to be able to take something so tragic and to turn it into something good. Not that everybody who may be listening should do work like that we're doing, but, you know, I believe that as human beings that we are always most powerfully positioned to serve the person that we once were. So whoever may be listening, what have you been through, right? You've probably been through some things. And if it's grief, you've learned some things from those lessons, share those lessons, help other people, when you start to help other people, things start to shift, right? And
I
for
have
me,
never. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. I remember feeling like I don't want to start talking about this. I really want to start talking about this calling that just wouldn't go away, this pull that wouldn't go away, and somebody said something to me, which I'll never forget. He was like, Phil, I believe what you're feeling are all the cries of other people who need to hear what you have to say. And that just pushed
Wow.
me. Yeah. Yeah. And
Both of those things you just said, man, are super. I never heard them put that way. Yeah. And so how do you, I think one of the, I'm imagining you went through this. I went through this too. And I think one of the things that holds people back from being of service to other people, because I'm with you, man. To me, it is one of the most important components of healing is just trying to do my best to make something good come out of this for some other people, man.
yeah.
I can't imagine not doing that. But I also understand why people, like, all the barriers like in people's minds and hearts that prevent them from doing that. And so, and because I think there's that quote, like, our biggest fear is not that we're powerless, it's that we're powerful beyond measure. And I actually really think that's true, man. Cause I think of, like, you look at like what you and I are doing, it's just two guys, grieving dads, making TikToks, man. Like, I mean, I don't even script these things. It's usually just me sitting in my friggin' car talking
Yeah.
about whatever's on my mind, and if I can do that, anybody can freaking do that, and but yeah, I love, man, I'm gonna write that down. Like, serve the person you once were.
Yeah.
But so you want to do this. So you're starting to get this calling that you want to make a difference, and So I guess it sounds like one of your first the big reveal was probably the TED talk. So
Yeah. Yeah.
how
That's
how,
that. Mhm.
how did you get over like all of the imposter syndrome and, like, what am I doing, and no one's, like, how did you work through that? Because I think
Yeah.
it stops a lot of people.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, fear is a killer, right? I mean, they say, like, what is it? I forgot the saying about, there's the best ideas are in the graveyards, right? Because so many people die with great ideas, and it's fear that stopped them. Um, so I realized my oldest brother, this is before anything happened with Perry. So, he s he's an adrenaline junkie. I've always had this fear of heights, and he offered me the opportunity to go and spend a week with him and some amazing people in Fiji. And he's like, "You want to go?" And at the time, I owned my own business, and I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to go." He's like, "Great." The caveat is you got to jump out of an airplane with me. And I was like, "Okay." You know, I knew I was scared, at the time, but it was months away. But as time drew closer, and then we're there in that week, and then it was like tomorrow we were going to do this thing. And I mean, I really started getting scared. I started thinking about like, this is really scary. And I remember my brother could see it in me. And I remember him even saying to me at the time, he's like, if you don't do this with me, he's like, I will never call you on Father's Day. I will only call you on Mother's Day. Like just like totally like, like making me feel like and, I had already told Perry and my friends that I was going to do this thing. And for me, it was much scarier to go home and tell my son that I wimped out than
Yeah,
to
yeah.
actually do it. And I don't know if you've ever jumped out of a plane or not, but it's scary. Like, so, clouds generally are around 7,000 feet. We jumped at 15,000 feet. So like we
It's
were going
high.
through the clouds and the guy's like, up, we're almost halfway there. And I'm like, halfway, like, oh my God. So, got to the point, jumped out of the plane and, terrified. But once I was started to fall, loved the whole thing. But when I finally hit the ground, man, there was this feeling of power that I had never felt before in my life. Like I was on a high that I can't explain for like a solid 2 weeks. Like I could do anything. All that to say, like when you're unbelievably afraid of something, and you do it anyway, there's a power on the other side of that that I just can't explain. And, there's a great book called The Obstacle is the Way.
Oh yeah, I
It,
love Brian Alley and
yeah,
Stoicism
absolutely. So, and I feel like a lot of that stuff is true with grief too, right? It's like, the hardest things you feel like you have to do, like I just can't do that thing because it's just too hard oftentimes is exactly what you need to do. So, I was really scared. And one of my mentors, came up to me before giving that speech, because obviously it was a crowd full of people, but more so, I think it's got like 300,000 views, not like multi-millions like some of them, but a decent amount of views. I remember him saying to me, he's like, You're scared because you're thinking about you." He's like, if I told you to go out there and your message was, I'm going to give $10,000 cash to everybody in the audience, come on up and get it. He's like, would that scare you? And I was like, no. He's like, yeah, it wouldn't, because you'd be giving. He's like, so just go out there and just give, and to not speak to the whole audience, but speak to one specific person, which is really like myself, right? Like a lot of the times these messages, I don't know about you, but oftentimes like I'm talking to my old self, right?
for
Like,
sure.
yeah, they're just as helpful for me as they are for other people. So it was that jumping out of the airplane experience, really, where it's like I was so scared that I'm like, all right, well, I have to do this. So it's like, if you can't, then you must, right? If there's something like that in your life where it's going to make your life better and you're just so scared, then you must immediately take action on that thing, because that's what creates the momentum, right? So, yeah, so I knew I was going to do it, and I didn't care about imposter syndrome. I realized that, you know, I didn't know it all, but I knew I had a message, and yeah, I just wanted to share it with other people.
It's funny. I don't have like this irrational fear of uh, skydiving at all. It's more that just it's the idea that on the very slight chance that I pulled the ripcord and the parachute didn't open,
Yeah.
I would just have too much time to consider what a fucking idiot I was for putting myself in this situation.
But, it's saying jump, never to jump out of an airplane, but that, I knew I was forced into it in that moment. And it taught me a great lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it like for you to you've done this TED talk and now to realize that, like, to have this realization dawn on you, like, oh my God, like I can actually make a difference here. Like
Yeah.
what was that like for you?
Oh my gosh. It was instant. Like literally that night, a woman came up to me, and I'll never forget it. She came up to me. So if you ever do a TEDx, like you can't just do your talk and leave. You have to hang out for like the meet and greet and stuff like that. So she came up to me. She took both of my hands in her hands. She already had tears in her eyes, and she had told me she had lost her husband. And she was like, "Thank you so much." She's like, "What you just said helped me more than you can know. And she just was going on and on. And I remember like she wouldn't like let me go, right? Like she just kept on holding my hands. And I was just so connected to her in that moment. And that's when I felt like this, wow, like to know that this message helped somebody would just meant so much to me, and that's what made me think, I want to keep doing this. I really want to keep doing this. And then that night, that same night, another gentleman came up to me and said, listen, I'm having a conference on resilience in a few months. I'd love if you'd come and speak there. So it kind of opened up like a speaking career as well. I mean, I don't do much of it, but I do some of it. So yeah, it was those things and realizing that you're what you're saying is affecting other people and it's really helping other people, that there a lot of people you think know these things that you're sharing through your TikToks and your Substack, but they don't. They don't know them. And so when they hear these things, a lot of times, like on my comments, I get so many thank you so much for this. I appreciate this and all of that. And I just love that. Like to me,
Yeah.
there is, you know, and a pretty important person said it's better to give than receive, right? And there is nothing more, nothing truer than that. Like I will never go back to a job unless I'm forced to.
Yeah, me
Like
too.
yeah, this type of work is what feeds my soul.
Yeah. So how do you go from you do this TED Talk, you obviously has a significant impact, and now you've made this your full-time career. I mean, what does that path look like? Because I think people too, like I always love talking to entrepreneurs because, I completely understand why people don't become entrepreneurs. I get it. Like it is not for the friggin' faint of heart, man. And there's like many days where I'm like, oh my God, having a job would just be so much easier. And then I spend a second thinking about that. I'm like, oh my God, what am I talking about? But
Yeah,
but I mean, so what does kind of that path look like for you to
yeah.
turn it into a way of like a livelihood?
It was hard. It
Yeah.
was really hard. I mean, I had already owned my own business once before. It was a service business. It was a sign shop and mostly doing like vehicle and boat wraps, those types of things. It was a pretty good gig. So I had some experience with that. Even like being like a solopreneur is even like harder, right? Because like you don't have anybody to talk to. Like no one gives you feedback. Hey, what'd you think about that post? Or what else can I do? It's like it's all about yourself, right? Like it's all working with figuring it out yourself. I had no idea how I was going to turn this into some way to monetize it. And for years I didn't. Like even after my TEDx, which was 5 years ago, I still was working, right? And so I got some speaking opportunities from that, and I was doing that. And then, a couple of years ago is when I started posting on TikTok and started just sharing pieces, of what I was feeling, and it just kind of grew from there. But after the TEDx, like so many people started reaching out to me, and I was having these calls. I wasn't charging anybody anything. Like I was just like, yeah, I'll talk to you. Yeah, I'll talk to you. And then even the TikTok thing, yeah, I'll talk to you. To the point where it's like, okay, I can't really do this for free anymore. So I was doing one-on-one work. I still do some of it. But I realized that's also trading time for money, which is not the best way to go about it. So then I created this program called the Inner Garden because I wanted to be able to take people through a specific path because of all the parts of this that grief that touches your life, like some of the things that we spoke about, right? To even the information of knowing like what actually is happening to your brain and body. Like just even knowing that for me was helpful. Like to understand why I don't want to move, why I feel so heavy in my chest, why I'm having this brain fog and understanding like what's going on. I'm like, okay, and then like the anxiety and understanding like that part of our brain that's constantly searching for threats even though they're not there, and setting you up to either to run or fight the saber-tooth tiger that isn't there, right? And then we don't do any of that, like we don't run or fight, and your body just got amped up to do either one of those, and then you do nothing. You have no place for that energy to go. It will turn into anxiety. It will turn into something if you don't let some of that energy out. So like those things, and then, friends and family, learning about the like part of, one of the elements in the garden is the weather, the things we control versus what we can control. All of these different aspects. I cover the 8 elements of the garden, then the gardener, and then integration of the whole thing. And that's been working out really well. But I still really want to do live retreats. That's because being together, with other people live, like the group aspect of what I do is so powerful because people are hearing other people. But I want to do a live group. And so I haven't done that yet. That's next for me because I don't know what I don't know. Like, what to charge or how much is food and beverage going to be and where should we do it? But, not knowing has never stopped me. So quite honestly, man, I'm not sure where this is going to go. It's like, you know, for me, everything I teach is also can be tracked back to scripture. Because for me, that's where the truth is, right? Like, and I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, there was a reason why I was saying about getting together in scripture. I don't remember where I was going to go with that.
So you said you're 54 and I'm 52. Like, I never get these things back, man. When I lose them, like I used to say, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue and it might have a chance of coming back. Now it's like, forget
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
So, well, on the retreat thing, if you ever want to jump on a call, I run a lot of like big retreats for dads and stuff, and I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, man. So if you ever want to talk about like the logistics,
yes.
design, facilitation, I mean, I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, I would love to. I feel like that's what I feel like it is a next step, is getting
Yeah.
getting everybody together in one space, teaching everything in a short amount of time, maybe 2, 3 days, and also having activities where people can talk to each other and things like that. Like that's I feel is probably the most effective way to do this. Oh, so what I was gonna say is like I don't know where this is leading, right? That type of things. But even like biblically, like you look at Abraham, or, so many Joseph and Jesus, like all those people, like God doesn't tell you what the whole plan is, right? It'll be like, I want you to go to this city. And when you get there, then I'll tell you what to do next, right? So I'm just following where I feel the Lord is leading me through this whole thing. And I know it'll work out.
Man, I'm not gonna. I'll just talk about this for a second. I could go on for 10,000 hours about this, but I grew up. I basically grew up an atheist, and then I became agnostic. And dude, it is really wild, like how called I am feeling toward
Amen.
Christianity. And
Yes.
what's amazing, but dude, it is so unsettling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's really interesting is a couple things. One is, I made some TikToks and some videos about this, and every single believer, and there's been tons of them who have messaged me on Substack and TikTok, and even like just personally who've seen these videos, and they're like, every single believer has
Yeah.
been the most beautiful, kindest, like offer to like walk this journey with, like, it's just amazing. And then get this. So one of the things is I've been, so I've gone to church a couple times. Like, this is like all uber newbie here, man. And but one of the things that's been coming up for me is that if there's a God, there's a hell. And the way my daughter died, I started to get like panicked that she's in hell, basically, because she died drinking and driving, and like, she almost killed 4 people and all of this, and just like really kind of wrestling with that. So anyways, make a long story short. And again, the people's just sent me so many amazing messages. I'm not like super worried about that, but it was like something I never
Right.
imagined coming up for me. I did this podcast interview with this guy. So this literally happened a couple of days ago when I posted some videos about this. I did a podcast interview with this guy, dude, man, yesterday. And I did not actually, it was an introduction from another friend. I did not actually read, like, I sent him some questions to answer. And I didn't actually read the answers until like 3 minutes before the podcast.
Yeah.
His story, man, he was drinking and driving. He killed 2 people. And it was all about, how faith and God and the path to redemption. And I was like, come on, man. Like, that's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a coincidence.
No. Well, hey man, look at David, man, in the Bible. Like, he was a murderer, he was I mean, even Paul. I mean, Paul murdered more people probably than anybody out of
Yeah.
all the people in the Bible and wound up writing half the New Testament, right? I mean, God judges your heart, not the actions. So, you know, I believe Chloe is in heaven, because even I didn't know her, but I do believe God judges your heart, not what you're doing there. Yeah. And I struggled with it too. And what, because I'm originally from New York, right? And I'm just naturally skeptical,
Yeah.
So when people started talking to me about church and stuff, I went to a church when I was in my mid 20s and accepted Jesus and started talking to my friends. Several of them were like, so Phil, you really believe that people live to be 800 years old? You really believe that someone lived in the belly of a whale for 3 days? Like, you believe that? And I hated that I couldn't explain that with any type of intellectual answers, like other than just this is what I'm feeling and things like that. So then I started studying apologetics and, apologetics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
I know Wes Huff. I'm a big fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that what I that through that, man, when I realized like, you know, this book, man, this book is way more than just a book, right? Like just the names, the numbers, the dates, like there's just too much for it to be coincidence. And I know this isn't that type of podcast. I mean,
No, it's
there's just, I am convinced that there is a God, there is a heaven, and that this book is the word of God. So yeah, I mean that solidified everything for me from that point forward.
appreciate you sharing that, man. Maybe one last question is, people see, anybody's watching or listening, they're seeing this, guy who's been through horrible tragedy. Now he's, you seem super well adjusted, you're doing well, etc. 10 years later, and even though you're in this, place now, how does grief show up for you today?
Yeah. So it shows up in different ways. Sometimes it shows up as tears. Sometimes it shows up as um sometimes I still get a little angry here and there, right? Like that I'm a human being. I'm gonna feel those emotions. It definitely changes, right? There's no doubt that it changes. Like, so for anybody that's listening that may be a few months in or a year in, promise you, I promise you, it won't always be this hard. You definitely grow around it as long as you just don't completely avoid it. That would be the biggest thing. So just recently it was the 10-year anniversary mark, and I did this tribute for Perry and I pulled up some baby photos and adolescent photos and things like that as to kind of go through, to show pictures of him and to put the music behind it, did all the editing myself and all that stuff. And holy cow, Jason, man, like, I mean, I had a towel on my lap and just snot was coming out of my nose. I could barely see my computer from crying so hard. I mean, I had not cried like that in a while, in a while. But it's so healing. Like, it's so healing to go through that as painful as it is. Like, I wanted to stop. It's when I'm like, "This is just too hard." Like, I'm just nobody knows that I'm doing this. I'm just gonna stop. But, I never let that stuff stop me, right? Like, so, yeah. I mean, it still shows up. I still cry in the shower sometimes. I still cry sometimes in the car when I think about Perry. And you know what? I don't ever want that to go away. I never want that to go away. It's almost grateful for it in some weird way.
I know what you mean, man, because I think the reality is that part of the healing process is coming to understand that something can be a tragedy and also like an incredible and yield incredible gifts at the same time. Those
Yes.
things can coexist, man. And part of healing, I think, is looking for the gifts. And sometimes, man, it's hard to look, but they're always there. They're
Yeah.
always there.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fella, hey man, like I thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Jason. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. So for people who want to learn more about your work, where can they find you? And of course, we'll put everything in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So, my website is philcohen.com. And if you even just search Google, the grief guy, like I will come up everywhere. If you TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, I'm on all those things. So if the show notes and the links will be there, you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. And thank you for just on behalf of the grievers, man. for the difference you're making in the world, because the work you're doing is desperately needed. And I know I'm super confident that the people you've worked with, their lives are immeasurably better as a result of having worked with you. So I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
You as well. Thank you so much.